I didn't move to Redstone Ridge for the neighbors. I came for the silence. 5 acres, pine-covered hills, a modest cabin I built with my own hands. After 20 years in the army, mostly as an armorer stationed everywhere from Kandahar to Kuwait, I wanted nothing more than to disappear into the woods with my tools, my dog tank, and my legally registered firearms. Peace, order, freedom. But Redstone Ridge came with strings. An HOA, Homeowners Association, they called it, but to me, it felt more like a creeping shadow dressed in polite letters and arbitrary rules. At the head of it was Marla Donnelly, a silver-haired tyrant in yoga pants, smiled like a politician, talked like a judge. She fancied herself the guardian of community values, which really meant she hated anything that didn't conform to her neat little vision. Her clipboard was never far from her side. Neither was her obsession with compliance. It started small, a warning about a shed being non-standard in color, a citation for excessive noise. After I spent a Saturday afternoon checking the 0 on my 308 on my own damn land, pointed into a private backstop berm. Then came the letter accusing me of maintaining an arsenal and posing a safety concern. I read that one twice. It was dressed in passive language, but the threat was clear: conform or be made to. Still, I ignored it. I wasn't breaking any laws. Every weapon I owned was locked, secured, and registered. I didn't owe the HOA anything, not an apology. Not an explanation, but Marla wasn't used to being ignored. The knock came at 9:12 a.m. on a Wednesday. I opened the door and immediately felt the chill of something off. 3 men stood on my porch in tactical vests, marked Redstone Ridge Security Division. They wore matching dark uniforms, with radio earpieces and patches designed to mimic federal agents. One held a clipboard with a laminated form titled Property Inspection and Confiscation Authorization. The man in front had a buzz cut and the kind of hollow eyes I recognized from too many deployments. Not a cop, not military, but something adjacent, private and unaccountable. "Sir," he said, his voice clipped and rehearsed, "we've received multiple reports of unsecured firearms on your property. Under HOA Regulation 16.3, we're authorized to inspect and remove any items deemed hazardous to the community." I stared at him. Regulation 16.3 doesn't exist. He smiled like a man used to getting his way. "Are you refusing a lawful inspection?" "Absolutely." The man to his right shifted, resting his hand casually on what looked like a sidearm. The third scanned the property, as if casing it. "You're impersonating law enforcement," I said quietly. "I suggest you walk away." "Sir, this isn't personal," Buzzcut replied. "But if you don't comply, we'll be forced to escalate. You'll be reported for obstruction of HOA security operations." I stepped back inside without another word and pressed the concealed button under my window frame. A mechanical hum filled the cabin as steel shutters descended over the windows. My home was now on lockdown, a feature I'd designed myself, not for paranoia, but for the very type of scenario I'd once written off as impossible. From a side window slit, I watched them back away. They conferred, irritated, but didn't. Push further. As their black SUV rumbled down my gravel drive, one of them leaned out the passenger side and casually placed a small object on the corner fence post, a surveillance camera, pointed straight at my door. I stood frozen, heart hammering, not from fear, but from fury. This wasn't neighborhood politics anymore. It was a coordinated intimidation campaign. That night, I called Darren. We served together in Fallujah. He'd gone federal after the Army, FBI, Cybercrimes Division, though he dabbled in organized crime cases when they needed boots-on-ground judgment. Can you send me a picture of their IDs? Badges, anything. I've got security footage. High res. An hour later, he called me back. Those uniforms. Those badges. Total fabrications. They're not law enforcement. They're not even licensed private security. And that van. He paused. It's registered to a shell company out of Nevada. There's already a flag on it. Impersonation. Suspected trafficking. Illegal surveillance. I felt something shift in my chest. A weight. Slow but deliberate. Like gears locking. Into place. They just tried to take my weapons, D, I said. If they're doing this to me, they're doing it to others. Darren's voice dropped. Then let's make sure they never try it again. I ended the call, stepped out onto the porch, and looked at the blinking red light on the surveillance. Camera, let them watch. I'd be ready next time. And next time, they wouldn't leave so easily. The next morning, I was at the county courthouse by 7:30, waiting for it to open, not because I trusted the system, far from it, but because paper trails mattered. I filed an official incident report with the Sheriff's Department, complete, with video footage, timestamps, and enhanced audio captures of the imposters on my porch. Sheriff Merrick, a tough, by-the-book guy with a wary respect for veterans, took one look at the footage and leaned back in his chair. These clowns ain't local law, and they're sure as hell not state-certified security. I nodded. Can you run the plates? Merrick sighed. Can't promise much. If they're using shell registration, it might bounce me around 6 databases. Try anyway, I said. This wasn't HOA business. It was a coordinated impersonation attempt. With weapons? His eyes narrowed. You think they'll come back? I'm counting on it. By the time I got home, the surveillance camera had been removed. In its place was a single red flyer, tucked under my mailbox. Non-compliance is a safety violation. Final notice. Below the text was a black and white logo that read, Redstone Ridge Neighborhood Safety Coalition. New name, new branding, same tyranny. Later that afternoon, Darren called. They ran the van again, tracked the tag through 6 cutouts, just like, you guessed. But guess what finally pinged? I waited. ATF flagged the same van 6 months ago in Nevada, suspected to be linked to a series of illegal property raids under the guise of community enforcement. They were pulling the same stunt. Fake IDs, confiscating legally owned weapons, even threatening arrest. I felt my jaw tighten. Why aren't they in jail? Technicality. Victims were too scared to come forward. No formal complaints, no forensic evidence. Until now. You got enough to move on them? Not directly, Darren said. But if you can get me inside, that van, or something from inside, will have more than enough for a federal warrant. I didn't have to think twice. The next morning, I watched from the tree line as the black van returned. Same time. Same 3 men. They didn't knock this time. Instead, they drove slowly past my property, likely looking for signs of activity or vulnerability. I stayed low, camera in hand, snapping shots of their faces through my telephoto lens. License plate, stickers, their fake uniforms, everything. They parked just down the hill in front of Marla Donnelly's home. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the 4th figure that stepped out of the house. A man I hadn't seen before, mid-50s, tall, with a wiry frame and a steel grey ponytail. He moved like someone who'd been in the field once, but hadn't forgotten how to be dangerous. He wasn't HOA. He wasn't a neighbor. I uploaded the images to Darren within minutes. Who's the guy with the ponytail? I asked. There was a pause on the other end. That's Raymond Fox, former contractor, real quiet exit from a shadowy logistics firm in 2013. Been off the grid ever since. Why's he with your HOA? You tell me. By nightfall, Darren had something even better: satellite footage from a government contractor that picked up the van's movement patterns for the last 2 weeks. They'd been visiting multiple homes, mostly those owned by veterans or older residents. Pattern matched perfectly with the ATF's flagged cases. I felt the familiar surge of controlled adrenaline as I moved through the dark toward Marla's Street, not to confront, not yet, but to observe. A man in my position doesn't act without data. I crouched behind a hedgerow as one of the imposters popped the back doors of the van. The interior glowed faintly red. What I saw made my stomach churn. Inside the van were stacked crates, black, hard cases, and what looked like a mobile command center, complete with a laptop array, surveillance monitors, and printed files. I caught a glimpse of my own photo on the screen, next to a digital dossier titled Subject A, Resistance Profile. They weren't just watching, they were profiling, preparing. I snapped pictures until the shutters on the van closed. Then I slipped back into the trees, heart pounding, the gravity of it settling like concrete in my chest. This wasn't rogue enforcement anymore. It was something bigger, something organized. By the time I returned to my cabin, Darren had already sent an encrypted message. I've seen enough. I'm escalating this to a joint task force. But I need one more thing. Evidence we can trace. Something physical. Get it, and we'll bury them. I looked out at the forest, where the van's taillights had disappeared into the dark. Marla, her fake safety coalition, and the ghost she'd partnered with had no idea the fire they'd just lit. Because now it was my turn to knock. 2 days later, I baited the trap. A fabricated message posted to the community forum under a burner HOA, alias read, Subject A, now confirmed stockpiling unregistered weapons in storm shelter, non-compliant, hostile. Risk level elevated, recommend intervention before local authorities intervene. I knew they monitored the forum. I'd cracked their surveillance packet. One of their jammers had intercepted my trail cam, but they didn't count on me having a fallback drive hidden inside my chicken coop. Every digital fingerprint they left told me one thing. They weren't professionals. They were imitators with toys they didn't fully understand. Dangerous, yes. Disciplined, not anymore. I spent the afternoon creating my own dossier. Fake enough to be bait, real enough to smell authentic. A printed map showing a weapons cache hidden beneath my cabin. A phony log of transactions, complete with names pulled from junk mail and an encrypted thumb drive loaded with nonsense code and a GPS tracker. It all went inside a reinforced steel ammo box and into my storm shelter, just like the bait suggested. By dusk, I was ready. Tank, my Belgian Malinois, was stationed behind the barn with a silent alert collar. I'd rigged infrared tripwires across the path behind the cabin and stashed my camera drone in a tree canopy above the field. If they came tonight, I'd have them on film, caught red-handed breaking and entering, and I'd be watching. It was 2:13 a.m. when Tank's collar vibrated. He didn't bark. He never did. But I saw him shift behind the barn. Ears perked, muscles tight. A black silhouette moved across the tree line, then another, and a third. All dressed in tactical gear, their van parked 200 yards away, partially hidden behind a privacy fence Marla had insisted was for aesthetics. One of them carried a bolt cutter. Another held a portable scanner, the kind used by customs to locate hidden compartments. They were coming for the box. I stayed low in my attic crawl space, watching the monitor as their heat signatures flared. On my infrared feed, they didn't speak, just signaled with hand gestures, and moved with disturbing precision. This wasn't their first job. The front door was bypassed with a lockpick gun. Fast, efficient. They didn't see the motion activated. Sensor inside the frame. Blink once, then twice. The house went still. No alarms. No resistance. They liked it that way. They moved straight for the basement door, just like the dossier said they would. One knelt and opened the panel. Another scanned the area. Then they found the box. I watched through my night vision camera as one of them cracked a satisfied grin and gave the signal to the others. They lifted it together, heavier than it looked, and headed back toward the van. They had no idea every step they took was tracked by a second GPS transmitter, embedded in the box lining, quietly pinging a government server Darren had secured just hours earlier. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. The moment they crossed back onto public roadway, the Joint Task Force was already waiting. The raid happened less than 15 minutes later. Darren filled me in at dawn. Federal agents intercepted them at a red light, took them down without firing a shot, found 6 unregistered firearms, counterfeit IDs, night vision, tactical binders with photos of at least 9 residents. Your dossier was marked for priority action. I nodded, staring out at the mist, rolling off the pines, and the van, confiscated. Full forensic sweep in progress. But there's more. He paused. They had surveillance files on your entire block. Cameras disguised as birdhouses. Audio bugs in mailboxes. Some residents had no idea they were even being watched. It wasn't just intimidation. It was control. That word hit me like a punch. Control. That's what this was all about. Marla's crusade to create a sanitized, compliant neighborhood. These weren't security measures. They were tools of psychological warfare, and she'd outsourced it to ghosts, I asked. The one question that had been gnawing at me all night. What about her? Marla! Darren's voice was lower now, unreadable. She's next. I hung up and stepped outside, feeling the sunrise hit my face. For the first time in weeks, I let the weight slide off my shoulders, even if just for a moment. Then I saw the golf cart Marla, cruising past like nothing had happened. Her fake smile beaming, sunglasses perched atop her perfectly blow-dried hair. She waved at me like a queen greeting her subject. The empire hadn't crumbled yet, but it was shaking. Because, now, the feds weren't just watching the van. They were watching her. The morning they came for Marla, she was in the middle of her usual HOA routine, clipboard in one hand, dog leash in the other, patrolling like a suburban warden. Her little terrier trotted ahead, tail high, oblivious to the storm brewing just past the hedgerows. 2 unmarked SUVs rolled up slow, blacked out windows. No sirens, just presence. I watched from my porch as the agents stepped out, federal jackets, calm but unmistakably lethal. One approached her gently, as if offering a compliment. The other held a warrant. Marla's smile faltered. Her posture stiffened. Then came the handcuffs, quiet, efficient, and deliberate. She protested, of course, loudly, claimed she was the victim, claimed she was acting on behalf of the neighborhood's safety. But no one bought it. Not the agents, not the neighbors peeking through blinds, not even her dog, who sat on the curb, panting in the heat. Word spread fast. Within hours, the neighborhood message boards lit up. Anonymous apologies, shocked confessions, and frantic denials from board members who claimed they had no idea Marla was working with ex-military contractors, running black ops out of a stolen van, but they knew. Maybe not all the details, but enough to stay silent. Darren called me that afternoon. His tone was businesslike, but I caught the edge of satisfaction in his voice. Van forensics came back. She's going down for conspiracy, unlawful surveillance, impersonation of law enforcement, and at least 5 federal weapons charges. And she's not the only one. Others on the board? I asked. 2 of them, minimum. Maybe 3. We're running financials now. They funneled HOA dues into a fake nonprofit that paid for the gear, uniforms, and consultant fees. Neighborhood Safety Coalition. I muttered. Exactly. Marla wasn't just enforcing rules. She was bankrolling a militia in golf attire. Over the next week, the investigation unfolded like a slow-moving avalanche. Boxes of confiscated documents, hidden cameras pulled from planters and porch lights. A live microphone found taped under the church pew where HOA meetings were held. She'd built a surveillance state, one lawn at a time. Neighbors started to talk about how Marla had known things she shouldn't have. Divorces no one had spoken of publicly, illnesses kept private, arguments whispered behind closed windows. It hadn't been gossip, it was intelligence. I held no victory parade. I didn't hang banners or throw barbecues. Instead, I rebuilt my storm shelter, replaced my locks, and walked tank every night past the place where the black van used to sit. Now just scorched tire marks on pavement. One afternoon, I saw Mr. Atkins, Vietnam vet, reclusive, rarely spoke. He walked up to me outside the general store and extended his hand. I heard what you did, he said simply. Thank you. It wasn't praise. It was something deeper. Recognition, understanding. The neighborhood held an emergency election. The next month, every former board member was barred from running, per community vote. A new set of leaders rose, less polished, more grounded. Folks who cared more about block parties than bylaws. I didn't run, but they kept a seat open for me anyway. Honorary advisor, they called it. I attended once, just once. And I told them something they hadn't heard from any HOA member in years. You don't keep a neighborhood safe by spying on each other, I said. You do it by talking, sharing, coffee, helping someone fix a fence, not finding them for a missing screw. The room was quiet. No one disagreed. When I walked out, I didn't look back. A few weeks later, Darren visited in person. He stood on my porch, looking out across the hills with that half smile of his. You ever think about working with us again? He asked. No, I said. I'm exactly where I need to be. He nodded. Still, we're lucky you were here. That box you built, that trap, it's already part of a training module. Good, I said. Maybe it'll stop the next Marla before they build another army. We shook hands, and he left without another word. That night, I sat under the stars, with Tank curled at my feet. The wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time in a long while, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Justice had come, not loud, not vengeful, just precise. The kind of justice you don't need to announce, because when it lands, everyone feels it, and the van, still impounded, still under investigation. But the feds told me something odd. It had been modified. Lead lining, signal dampeners, equipment well beyond HOA budgets. Something deeper had financed this, something bigger. And if that van was just the beginning, well, I'll be ready.